Most people chase money but remain powerless. They earn, they spend, and they lose. Why? Because they mistake wealth for security, instead of using it as a weapon for influence. In this lesson, you will discover how to do what few ever master: convert your money into lasting power. This is the wisdom of Machiavelli and the elite. Most men believe money is the final destination, the ultimate prize in life's struggle. They chase it with obsession, hoard it with fear, and cling to it as if coins and notes can shield them from fate. But this is the greatest illusion of the weak. For money by itself is fragile. It can be stolen, devalued, wasted, or consumed. It is only a resource, never the throne itself. Those who mistake wealth for power remain slaves to their fortune, guarding it nervously like prisoners guard their chains. Understand this: money is never the end. It is only the means to something greater, power. And power is the true currency of rulers, kings, merchants, and elites across every century. Why? Because power transforms wealth into permanence. The rich man without power is vulnerable. His gold may be envied, taxed, seized, or squandered in foolish pleasures. But the powerful man, even with little wealth, can command armies, rewrite laws, bend markets, and influence the minds of men. When money fades, power endures. And when power is secured, money will always return to its master. Look at history. The Medici family of Florence did not merely accumulate coin. They turned their banking wealth into alliances with popes, kings, and artists. They used money not to indulge in idle comfort, but to control culture, religion, and politics. Their gold purchased not only beauty, but dominion. That is why their name still echoes centuries later, while countless forgotten merchants, richer in coin but poorer in influence, vanished from memory. Or consider the Roman senators who owned estates richer than entire provinces. Their wealth alone did not make them feared. It was their ability to turn that wealth into votes, armies, and political leverage that kept them relevant. A man with a fortune but no seat in the Senate was only a fattened calf, waiting to be devoured. And what of today? The elite still follow the same principle. A common man may earn millions, yet he spends it on pleasures, distractions, and fleeting luxuries. The elite, by contrast, convert their millions into institutions, networks, and tools of control. They buy influence over media, finance, and politics. They ensure that their wealth does not merely purchase comfort, it purchases obedience. You see, money has no voice on its own. Left unused, it is silent. But when placed in the hands of the ambitious, it becomes a sword sharper than steel, a key that opens doors closed to the masses. A man who chases money for comfort seeks only to rest. A man who seeks money for power seeks to rule. And therein lies the difference between the sheep and the shepherd. Do not think for a moment that your wealth, no matter how great, guarantees you safety. There are countless men richer than kings who were destroyed because they lacked the foresight to convert gold into strength. They trusted money as if it were a fortress, only to discover it was nothing but a wooden shield against iron. The true art lies in using your wealth as a weapon, as a lever, as a force multiplier. Every coin you earn should be seen not as an ornament, but as ammunition. The fool thinks in terms of price, the wise thinks in terms of influence. Ask yourself, will this money buy me pleasure, or will it buy me leverage? Will it disappear into the hands of merchants, or will it create a foundation that others cannot move without me? The man who spends to appear rich may win admiration for a moment, but admiration fades. The man who spends to gain control wins submission, and submission lasts. This is why the elite never stop at wealth. For them, wealth is only the seed. The harvest is power, and that harvest feeds generations. Most men live as collectors of gold. The few who rise above use gold to collect men, and those who collect men who command loyalty, dependency, and fear. These are the true masters of the world. The rest merely count coins in their service. Most men make the mistake of thinking wealth is secure only when hidden. They bury it in vaults, disguise it in numbers, conceal it in properties that no one sees. They believe that safety lies in invisibility. But what they fail to grasp is that power feeds not on secrecy, but on perception. And perception is shaped by what is seen, not what is hidden. The elite understand this truth: wealth that is invisible does not command respect. Power must be displayed strategically, with precision and intention. A man with a mountain of gold hidden under his floorboards is still treated like a beggar if no one sees the mountain. Meanwhile, another with half that wealth, displayed with elegance and authority, is honored, feared, and followed. This is why visibility is not an indulgence. It is an investment. Think of the princes of the Renaissance. They knew that their palaces were not just homes. They were weapons. Every marble column, every fresco, every banquet was a declaration of dominance. Their wealth spoke before their lips did. The merchant might have coin, but the prince had presence, and presence rules where coin alone is powerless. Even the Medici, bankers of Florence, who could have remained anonymous moneylenders, understood the necessity of visibility. They financed cathedrals, sponsored great artists, and stamped their name across the very city. It was not enough that they had wealth. It had to be seen, it had to impress, it had to inspire awe. By making their fortune visible in the stones of Florence and the genius of Michelangelo, they transformed private banking into public authority. Their power endured not because of the gold in their vaults, but because of the visibility of their wealth in the lives of their people. And this principle persists in every age. In our time, billionaires do not merely hold shares, they build skyscrapers that scrape the heavens, foundations that carry their names, empires that dominate headlines. A building is more than steel and glass. It is a statement carved into the skyline: I exist, I am permanent, and you cannot ignore me. Even a logo, shining in neon across a city, becomes a symbol of power greater than gold hidden in silence. You must understand that visibility is not vanity. It is strategy. To appear powerful is often more important than to be powerful. For men obey appearances as much as they obey reality. A fortune hidden in shadows inspires envy in no one and loyalty in none. But a fortune displayed with authority creates influence, aspiration, and submission. Men follow what they can see. They admire, they envy, they respect what they cannot ignore. Yet this visibility must be artful, never reckless. Too much exposure invites attack, but the right exposure builds a reputation unshakable. It is not about flaunting luxuries for applause. That is the folly of the nouveau rich who drown in trinkets. It is about shaping a narrative of strength. A fortress on a hill is not only stone, it is a signal. A grand hall is not only decoration, it is propaganda. When wealth is seen, it tells a story, and stories bend the minds of men. Consider this. When a leader steps into a council chamber clothed in simple robes, he is treated as one among many. But when he enters in garments woven with authority, when he sits upon a chair carved to remind others of his dominion, before he even speaks, he has already ruled their perception. His appearance dictates their response. Money bought the garment, money bought the throne, but what he truly purchased was visibility. And that visibility purchased obedience. The crowd does not need to know the extent of your wealth, they only need to believe in the strength of your presence. A well-placed gesture, a calculated display, a symbol carved in stone or broadcast in rumor, these are investments more powerful than coins left idle. For in the world of rulers and rivals, silence is weakness, but presence is command. Wealth hidden is wealth forgotten. Wealth visible is power remembered. Power is not won by generosity alone. It is not secured by kindness nor by empty promises. Power is gained when men depend on you so deeply that they cannot rise without your hand. Wealth, when used correctly, becomes the chain that binds others, not by force, but by need. And dependency, once created, is the most enduring form of control. Understand this truth: a gift, freely given, dies in memory. Men may thank you today, but they forget tomorrow. Worse still, generosity without strategy makes them believe they owe you nothing. But when wealth is given as a loan, as patronage, as an opportunity that they cannot replicate without you, then they are bound. They must return to you again and again for what only you can provide, and so their future becomes tied to your fortune. Look at the powerful families of Florence, Venice, or Rome. They did not scatter their gold among the people as alms to the poor. No, they placed their wealth in the hands of promising merchants, ambitious artists, rising politicians. They gave enough to lift these men up, but never enough to make them independent. And so, generation after generation, these families built networks of loyal servants disguised as allies, men who knew that without their patron, they would fall back into obscurity. That is control through dependency. Consider the way rulers use credit. A prince who gives a man land outright may create temporary loyalty, but a prince who lends him land under conditions ensures obedience for a lifetime. The borrower's prosperity becomes the ruler's chain around his neck. To default is to lose everything. To thrive is to thrive under the ruler's shadow. In this way, wealth becomes not just money, but leverage, an invisible rope by which you guide the ambitions of others. Even in our modern age, the same principle governs the movements of the elite. Banks do not simply give, they lend, they invest, they entangle. Nations themselves bend to those who control credit, because debt is dependency on a colossal scale. A man may despise his creditor, but he cannot act without him. And the one who cannot act without you is already half your subject. But note this, dependency must be engineered carefully. If you give too much, you create equals. If you give too little, you create resentment. The art lies in balance, enough to lift others high enough to be useful, but not so high that they no longer need your hand. Dependency thrives in the middle ground, where gratitude and fear are interwoven, where opportunity is dangled but never complete. History shows us the danger of failing to master this art. Many rulers believed loyalty could be purchased outright with gifts, lands, or titles. But once given, these gifts empowered their subjects to stand without them. And what happens when a subject can stand without you? He no longer needs you. What happens when he no longer needs you? He begins to rival you. This is why men who give foolishly create their own enemies. But men who bind through calculated dependency create subjects who cannot defect without destroying themselves. Think also of how dependency shapes families, friendships, and alliances. A father who provides endlessly for his sons without teaching them reliance on his authority breeds arrogance. But a father who makes his sons aware that their inheritance, their station, their very name depends on his continued favor keeps their loyalty alive. Likewise, in politics and commerce, allies must always feel that their rise is tied to your will. Dependency is more subtle than force. Chains can be broken, armies can rebel, but the need for survival, opportunity, and wealth keeps men tethered more securely than any iron shackle. A man may fight against fear, but he will never fight against his own necessity. To make others dependent is to enslave them with their own desires. This is why the elite do not spread wealth like seed in a field. They plant it in chosen soil, in men whose growth strengthens their own foundations. The fruit that grows may be plucked by others, but the root always belongs to the one who planted it. In this way, they create a garden of dependence, thriving, yet unable to live without the hand that waters them. Wealth, when hoarded, is nothing but silent stone. It may comfort the miser, but it cannot shield him from enemies. A fortune kept in the dark breeds no loyalty, wins no allies, and secures no throne. The wise do not guard wealth merely for themselves. They wield it as a weapon to bind others to their cause. For alliances forged with coin endure longer than alliances born of mere words. The truth is this: no man, however powerful, rules alone. Even kings require nobles, generals, merchants, and spies. Even the richest banker requires clients, partners, and patrons. Isolation is weakness. It leaves you surrounded by rivals who seek only to strip you of what you have. But alliances, carefully chosen, carefully nourished, turn your wealth into a fortress built of living men. Think of the great powers of Italy during my time. The Medici did not merely use their gold to enrich themselves. They invested in others, supporting artists, scholars, politicians, even rival families, turning potential threats into allies. By financing the ambitions of others, they transformed competitors into clients, men whose rise was tied to Medici fortune. Each coin spent was a coin that purchased not luxury, but loyalty. And when the storm of politics raged, they were protected not only by their wealth, but by the web of alliances that wealth had secured. Even beyond Italy, history teaches the same lesson. Alexander the Great conquered with armies, yes, but he ruled through alliances. He distributed wealth among local leaders, married into dynasties, and used treasure not simply to reward, but to bind. The empire he forged stretched across continents, not because of brute force alone, but because his wealth made others share in his fate. And what of our own time? The wealthy who endure are those who do not stand isolated at the top, but those who distribute their fortune into networks of allies. They sponsor political campaigns, endow universities, invest in companies led by ambitious men. They do not give for charity's sake. They give to ensure that when the moment of conflict comes, they are not alone. Every ally is a shield, every dependent a soldier, every network a barrier against ruin. But take caution. Alliances built on mere generosity are fragile. If you give too freely, you create ingrates who believe themselves equal. If you give without design, you create allies who owe you nothing. True alliance is not about scattering gifts. It is about planting seeds in the ambitions of others. Give enough to strengthen them, but not enough to free them. Ensure that their rise depends on your continued favor. In this way, their victories become your victories, and their survival requires your hand. A prince who hoards all his wealth is vulnerable. His enemies gather in secret, and his friends drift away. But a prince who uses wealth to strengthen the ambitions of others builds a circle of protection. Even if his enemies multiply, they will find him surrounded by men who see his downfall as their own ruin. That is the power of alliance, to make your success the success of others, and your survival their necessity. Remember too that alliances built with wealth reach further than swords. An army may conquer territory, but an alliance wins the hearts and loyalty of men without bloodshed. When a man sees that his fortune grows because of you, he will fight to keep you secure. When a city thrives because of your coin, it will resist your enemies before you even raise your voice. This is the strategy of the elite. They do not fear sharing their wealth, for every coin shared wisely returns multiplied in loyalty, influence, and strength. They understand that money is not diminished when given with purpose. It is transformed into protection, into reputation, into dominion. A fortune divided among allies becomes greater than a fortune guarded by one man. It is in this way that wealth, which by itself is fragile, becomes unbreakable when tied to the lives and hopes of many. The ruler who invests only in himself will be crushed alone. The ruler who invests in others will stand supported by 1,000 invisible hands, each holding him upright, each fearing to let him fall. Most men spend their wealth chasing applause. They buy luxuries to be admired. They waste fortunes to be envied. They hunger for their names to be sung by the crowd. But applause is cheap, and envy is dangerous. The man who seeks noise invites both resentment and betrayal. True power is not built on being loved by the many. It is built on being feared and respected by the few who matter. And wealth, wisely used, is not spent on noise, but on silence. Consider this: a rumor can destroy a prince faster than an army. A whisper in the wrong ear can unravel a career, a dynasty, an empire. Fools spend their coin to appear magnificent, but the wise spend their coin to ensure dangerous mouths remain closed. Silence, after all, is the most valuable commodity money can buy, Because silence guards power more effectively than any wall of stone. Look at the courts of Europe in my time. Kings did not merely fight wars with soldiers, they fought wars with words, rumors, and secrets. A single scandal, a single tale of weakness, could unseat a monarch. Those who endured were not always the strongest in arms, but the shrewdest in silencing enemies before their words could spread. Gold placed in the right hand could keep an enemy quiet forever, without bloodshed, without rebellion, without spectacle. The Medici understood this well. They funded not only artists and allies, but also spies, informants, and scribes. They paid to shape narratives, but more importantly, they paid to prevent dangerous truths from spreading. When rivals whispered, those whispers were smothered before they grew into storms. This is why their dynasty survived assassination attempts and uprisings. They knew the cost of silence was always cheaper than the cost of chaos. Even today, the principle remains unchanged. The elite do not waste their fortunes trying to be adored by the masses. They know love fades quickly, but fear and control endure. They spend not on trophies, but on discretion. They buy lawyers who erase scandals, advisors who bury mistakes, companies that control narratives. They purchase silence because silence preserves the image of strength while noise exposes weakness. Noise, after all, is the enemy of power. The crowd is fickle. It cheers today and riots tomorrow. A man who spends to impress the masses discovers too late that their love cannot protect him. But a man who spends to silence critics, to control information, to suppress damaging truths, finds that his reputation becomes untouchable. He may not be adored, but he will be obeyed. And obedience, not adoration, is the foundation of rule. Think of a rival who seeks to rise against you. If you confront him openly, you create noise, you reveal conflict, you stir attention, you awaken other enemies. But if you quietly purchase his silence, if you bury his ambition in coin or in contracts that bind his tongue, then the threat vanishes before it ever becomes visible. This is the art of buying silence. To end battles before they begin, to erase enemies without anyone knowing they existed. But let us be clear, buying silence is not only about suppressing enemies. It is also about restraining friends. Those closest to you often know the truths that could harm you most. To ensure their loyalty, it is not enough to reward them. You must bind them with a silence that benefits them more than betrayal ever could. They must know that as long as they protect your secrets, they will prosper. And as soon as they speak, they will fall. This is why discretion must always be valued above applause. A man praised loudly by the crowd may fall the next day when a rumor exposes him. A man who moves quietly, securing silence where it matters, walks untouched through storms that would destroy others. The wise ruler, therefore, does not seek noise. He does not care for the shouts of admiration or the fleeting worship of the masses. He cares only for the quiet control of the truth, for the silencing of dangerous tongues, for the invisibility of his mistakes. Wealth spent here is never wasted, for silence is the shield of power, and without it, every fortune is fragile. Most men believe that wealth is best spent on pleasures, golden chalices, fine garments, extravagant feasts. They imagine that comfort is the reward of fortune. But the wise know that true wealth is not consumed, it is transformed. The most powerful transformation money can achieve is not into comfort, not into display, but into knowledge and access. For knowledge sharpens the mind, and access opens the gates to where real power is forged. Gold that purchases luxury fades quickly. A banquet is eaten, a jewel is forgotten, a carriage rots with time. But gold spent on learning, on information, on proximity to decision makers, multiplies itself endlessly. It becomes influence, strategy, foresight. The man who possesses knowledge commands those who merely possess wealth. For foresight always defeats impulse. Think of the princes and merchants of the Renaissance. Those who thrived were not only those who bought armies or land, but those who bought education, tutors, libraries. A single insight into trade routes political alliances, or hidden weaknesses of rivals was worth more than any mountain of coin. The Medici knew this well. They invested not only in art, but in scholars, philosophers, mathematicians. Knowledge made their fortune durable, for it gave them vision beyond the short sight of their rivals. But knowledge alone is not enough. It must be paired with access. What use is knowing the secrets of power if you remain locked outside its chambers? This is why the wise spend their wealth to buy proximity to rulers, councils, and circles of influence. A man with a fortune, but no access to power, is like a king without a crown. He may command attention among the common, but he is irrelevant among the true players of destiny. Consider this: a rich merchant who hoards his wealth in his home is a target, but not a ruler. A merchant who uses that wealth to gain entry into the palace, to sit at the prince's table, to whisper into the ears of lawmakers, this man becomes untouchable. For now his wealth is shielded not only by his own power, but by the very structures of authority. His coin has purchased him not only influence, but security. This principle endures in every age. In our time, billionaires do not simply buy yachts and mansions. They purchase access to policymakers, to institutions, to media. They fund universities, think tanks, campaigns. They know that real power is not enjoyed in solitude, but in the rooms where decisions are made. And to enter those rooms, one must pay the price. The masses spend money to be seen. The elites spend money to be heard in places where the masses are never allowed. Knowledge and access also serve another purpose. They insulate you from risk. The man who knows the storm is coming prepares, while others are caught unaware. The man who has access to rulers hears of wars, laws, and opportunities before the crowd. Thus, while the ignorant drown in events, the informed ride upon them like waves. Wealth spent to secure this advantage is not cost but investment, for it ensures survival when others fall. But let us not forget, the pursuit of knowledge and access must be strategic. To learn everything is impossible. To learn what matters is priceless. A ruler does not study every art. He studies what gives him leverage over rivals. A merchant does not need to know every trade. He needs to know which routes, which ports, which alliances matter most. In the same way, access must not be wasted on every gathering. To be seen in every hall is weakness. To be present only in the right chambers is strength. This is why those who understand power spend less on their own pleasure and more on their own vision. They hire spies, they cultivate scholars, they send emissaries abroad, they buy their way into councils and courts. They know that the feast ends in a night, but the knowledge it purchased can secure empires. They know that a jewel may shine on the hand, but a secret shines in the mind forever. They know that access is not a privilege, but a weapon, one that allows them to shape events before the world even knows they are unfolding. The man who spends money on knowledge becomes dangerous. The man who spends money on access becomes untouchable. Most men, when they come into possession of wealth, cling to it as if hoarding alone will secure their future. They believe that by locking their coin in vaults, by hiding it under stone, by guarding it with desperate hands, they will preserve their fortune. But wealth that does not move decays. Gold that sits idle is no different than stagnant water. It breeds rot. It loses its power, and in time it becomes worthless. The elite understand that the preservation of wealth comes not from stillness, but from circulation. Money must move, but it must move with purpose. The common man spends recklessly, scattering his coin for pleasures that vanish in days. The miser hides his wealth so tightly that it dies with him, unspent, forgotten, and irrelevant. Both are fools. The wise know the secret balance. Wealth must flow like blood in the body, circulating, nourishing, strengthening, never stagnant, never wasted. Every coin must be placed where it multiplies influence, strengthens position, and fortifies legacy. Consider the merchants of Venice, who did not simply bury their fortunes in vaults, but invested them in fleets, expeditions, and trade routes. Their wealth returned to them multiplied, not because they clung to it, but because they set it into motion. Or look at the banking families of Florence, who lent their money not out of generosity but out of strategy. Their coins moved through kingdoms, courts, and armies, always returning heavier than when they left. It was circulation, not hoarding, that made their dynasties endure. But circulation does not mean waste. The fool believes that because money must move, it must be scattered. He invests without foresight, spends without calculation, gives without restraint. This is not circulation but leakage. The art lies in directing money like a general directs troops. Each coin a soldier, each investment a maneuver, each expenditure a step toward victory. Money must flow, but only toward rivers that lead to the sea of power. Think of how rulers used patronage. They did not distribute wealth to the masses without thought. They placed it in the hands of generals, artists, scholars, allies, men whose success reinforced their own authority. Every coin spent strengthened the image of the ruler, secured loyalty, or expanded influence. This is circulation at its highest form. Wealth never wasted, only transformed into power that endures beyond the life of the giver. Even in our time, the elite do not hoard their wealth in idle accounts. They circulate it into investments, industries, political networks, and institutions that ensure their relevance. A fortune locked away shrinks with time, but a fortune set into motion builds empires. The rich who endure are those whose wealth is always at work, shaping the world in their favor while others merely count coins. Circulation also guards against envy. The man who hoards appears selfish, a fattened animal waiting to be slaughtered. The man who spends lavishly on pleasures appears foolish, a target for ridicule and contempt. But the man who circulates wisely appears powerful, generous to the right hands, feared by rivals, and admired by allies. His wealth does not make him a target, it makes him indispensable. There is another truth. Wealth, when stagnant, attracts predators. A man known for hoarding invites thieves, usurers, and greedy rulers to strip him of his fortune. But a man whose wealth is constantly in motion, tied to networks, allies, and institutions, cannot be so easily attacked. To strike at his fortune is to strike at many, for his wealth has already spread into the roots of society, into the ambitions of others, into the very fabric of power. His fortune is not his alone. It is the bloodstream of those who depend on him, and they will defend it as their own. This is why the elite treat money not as treasure but as energy. Energy unused dissipates. Energy directed reshapes the world. The prince who keeps his coin hidden dies with his fortune forgotten. The prince who circulates his coin wisely ensures that his name, his house, his influence outlive him by centuries. Wealth preserved by circulation becomes dynasty. Wealth hoarded becomes dust. You have now seen the truth that few dare to acknowledge money itself is not power, but the raw material from which power is forged. The masses chase wealth for comfort, for fleeting pleasures, for vanity. But the elite, the princes, the merchants, the dynasties, they understand what most men never will, that every coin is a weapon, every investment a strategy, every expenditure a statement of dominance. We have unmasked the illusions that hoarding leads to security, that generosity is virtue, that luxury displays strength. No, true strength lies in using wealth as a lever, a force that bends people, institutions, and even entire nations toward your will. Money is not meant to sit idle. It must be weaponized, multiplied, and circulated with precision. The lessons of history are ruthless. Families that squandered their fortune in indulgence vanished into obscurity. Kingdoms that hoarded their gold without purpose were plundered by those who dared to move it. But those who mastered the art of turning money into power carved their names into stone, their influence stretching beyond their lives, their wealth transmuted into legacy. And so, you are left with a choice. Will you treat money as a tool for comfort, or will you wield it as a weapon for control? Will you spend like the masses, or will you circulate like the elite? The future belongs only to those who understand that wealth is never the end. It is only the beginning of power.